Welcome to The Explainer. Sometimes a single government document, just a piece of paper, can completely change the course of history. Today, we're diving into a census from over a century ago that did way more than just count people. It actually drew political battle lines in India that, believe it or not, still exist today.
Okay, so let's get right into it. How on earth did a routine bureaucratic exercise, a census of all things, turn into a political firestorm? Well, it all came down to 10 seemingly simple but incredibly loaded questions. Right, so the man at the center of this whole thing was the Census Commissioner, a guy named Albert Gait. In 1910, he sends out this circular, this memo, that on the surface seems kind of academic, but in reality, it was pure political dynamite. This was the first time the British Raj ever formally tried to separate communities they called Untouchables, who we now know as Dalits, from the wider Hindu majority.
So how did he do it? Well, he came up with this really controversial checklist, a set of 10 tests to figure out if a community was truly Hindu, at least in the orthodox Brahminical sense. So you got to think of this less as just collecting data and more as a powerful act of definition, of drawing lines where officially none had existed before. The first set of questions went straight for the jugular, right to the heart of religious belief. Did a community accept the supremacy of Brahmins? Did they respect the Vedas, the core Hindu holy books? Or did they worship gods outside of the main accepted pantheon? I mean, these questions alone immediately put the Hindu status of millions of people into question.
All right, next up, it wasn't just about what you believed, but what you did. The tests looked at religious practice. Were these communities served by, and I'm quoting the circular here, good Brahmin priests? Or did they have their own religious leaders, kind of operating outside the official system? And then, bam, the final tests hit the rigid social hierarchy of caste head on. They asked flat out about the practice of untouchability. Were certain people banned from temples? Was their very touch thought to be polluting? It even got into things like diet, asking about beef consumption, which was and is a major taboo in Orthodox Hinduism.
So you can imagine the reaction from upper caste Hindu leaders, right? It was immediate. And let me tell you, it wasn't a calm theological debate. Nope, it was pure political panic. They didn't see a religious question. They saw a direct threat to their power. And here's why. You have to understand the context here. This was happening right when the British were bringing in new reforms that tied political power, seats in councils, directly to population numbers. Politics was fast becoming a numbers game, and Gates' little circular threatened to wipe millions of people out of the Hindu colony. This slide really shows the incredible U-turn that happened. I mean, think about it. Before this census, many upper caste groups took pride in ritual purity, which meant excluding others. But suddenly, when their political power was on the line, the strategy did a complete 180. The very same people they'd pushed away for being impure were now desperately needed for their votes. And this fear, this anxiety, was captured perfectly in this super influential pamphlet that came out around that time called Hindus, a Dying Race. The argument was pretty stark. If the lower castes weren't counted as Hindu, the community would shrink, it would lose its majority status, and it would basically disappear as a major political force. And this chart just lays out the raw numbers, the political math they were all doing in their heads. Look at the difference. With the Dalit population included, the Hindu community is a clear majority. But take them away, that majority is in serious trouble, and in some big provinces, it might vanish altogether. So what did they do? Well, in response, these upper caste organizations launched this really calculated campaign. And I want to be clear here, this was not about genuine social reform or tearing down caste barriers. It was all about political consolidation. It was about protecting their power. One of their main tactics was something called shuddhi, which is a kind of ritual purification. Groups like the Arya Samaj would hold these ceremonies to bring Dalits into the Hindu fold. But here's the catch. It was often just for show. It was more about making sure they'd be counted in the census, not about giving them real equality. So the goal was crystal clear, right? Present a united Hindu front for the census takers, for the British. But behind the scenes, keep that social hierarchy exactly as it was. It was a unity on paper, but not really in practice. So what do you think happened when the lower caste groups themselves tried to organize, when they saw the census as their chance to claim their own political identity? Well, they got shut down, fast. The nationalist mainstream press branded their movements as divisive, anti-national, and a threat to unity.
Okay, so with all this intense backlash, the British government did eventually back down from Gates's specific proposal. But, and this is a huge but, it was too late. The cat was out of the bag. The data had been gathered, these new categories had been created in people's minds, and the entire political landscape had been changed forever. That circular really lit a fuse, and you can see the chain reaction play out right here on this timeline. By 1931, the British make it official, creating a category called the depressed classes. That leads directly to a massive conflict over political representation in 1932, the Pune Pact. And then, by 1935, the Government of India Act creates the permanent legal category of scheduled castes, a direct descendant of Gait's initial list.
And here's the incredible irony. This very same census data, created by the British to define and control, became this powerful tool for Dalit leaders, especially the brilliant Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. He basically turned it right back on them, arguing that their own government had provided the proof that Dalits were a distinct community and deserved their own separate political rights. And all of this whole battle over numbers and identity, it all builds to this massive showdown, the Pune Pact of 1932. This was a historic clash between Mahatma Gandhi, who wanted a single unified electorate, and Dr. Ambedkar, who fought for separate electorates to guarantee real political power for Dalits. The fight over census numbers had become a fight for the political soul of a nation. So what's the big takeaway here? The story of the Gait Circular shows us that a census is never just about counting people, is it? It's about power, it's about creating categories, it's about who gets a voice and who doesn't. And that leaves us with a question that's just as relevant today as it was back then. Who gets to draw the lines?